So this is the fifth time that I am trying to record this video because I am not able to justify the value on this iPhone 14 Pro Max. Now, well, it is a very good smartphone and this is a long-term review of the same. I want to break the hype that why this is the most popular smartphone to buy in this year and why you are almost unable to buy this smartphone if you are in Canada or if you are in the North American market. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a very good smartphone, still a very capable smartphone, good battery backup, I would say good use of materials on this smartphone, good screen to body ratio, a great display, great speakers, and so on. But when I compare it to something like the latest Googles in the world, I think that those smartphones, if not the best hardware, those smartphones has better value to money ratio, and I would suggest those smartphones any day over these smartphones this year. So I upgraded from the iPhone 13 Pro Max to 14 Pro Max this year around, and there is no value. I would say if you have a 12 Pro Max or 13 Pro Max and if you want to upgrade this year, go to a Pixel 7 Pro or a Pixel 7 rather than upgrading to the iPhone 14s of the world. Now, this year around the 14 Pro and the 14 Pro Max are the only smartphones out of the whole bunch which comes with this dynamic island display. And I would say that while this does make your smartphone look a bit different than the iPhone 13 Pro Max just for a moment, but other times you do not even notice if there is some kind of change on these smartphones in comparison to the last year ones. Now, this dynamic island is a very smart I would say feature that had been implemented by Apple this year around. It uses all those dynamic libraries to punch in all those animations and to punch in all those details from the live notification libraries that you have on the iPhone. So whenever you are ordering something, you might see those things on one side of the dynamic island, like if you are ordering from Uber or if you're using something like listening to music. So the other part of the dynamic island, it could be a music play notification. You can tap and it will come up in a bigger size just like a widget, and this is how it works. Now, you know, even if there was not a dynamic island on this iPhone, you could still do the same thing by swiping down, and you know, you have all those notifications over the left hand side. So that is not a bad thing to do, right? Like, you do not need a dynamic island for doing all those same things. It's just a gimmick over something that would give a real value to you. So if you are thinking to upgrade this year from iPhone 12 Pro Max or 13 Pro Max just for this gimmick, this dynamic island, I would say just, you know, wait for a year or two and let the price of the iPhone 14 Pro Max down, buy a used one or buy something from a carrier for a really cheap price rather than getting this one at full price over here. Now, another thing that I really want to talk about on this smartphone is the display. And when it comes to display, I want to talk about the always on display first. So this feature is something that I was really waiting about on this smartphone, even more than this dynamic island or the whole punches on the screen. Now, Apple did something really good. It tried to make this feature look a bit different than all the always on displays that we have. Now, what we think about always on display is that a black screen with all the notifications, the widgets and so on. But what Apple did was really interesting. It tried to shade down your lock screen a bit and then apply some of the widgets in terms of those notifications over there. It does look cool, but it is a battery drainer, I would say. In my experience, the battery drainage was about 7 to 8%, and which is not a good thing, right? If it takes up about 7 to 8% of battery in the entire day of usage, then it kills the purpose of buying a Pro Max model, at least for me. So this is something that you really need to keep in mind while turning on the always on display feature on this smartphone. Now, I think that Apple is implementing a new feature in the latest versions where you can turn off the wallpaper from the always on display, which is a neat feature and which is an improvement and a lesson that Apple took from all the feedbacks which were provided by the users. So hey Apple, good thing done, but yeah, now your always on display is as similar as to any other of them that any smartphone manufacturer from Androids of the world had in the past. Another thing that has been changed on this smartphone is how bright the smartphone gets in this latest iteration. Now this one over here, Apple claims is a 2000 nit peak brightness of display, while you do not notice a lot of difference inside, but whenever you go outside it is a big difference in terms of the screen brightness. Even if you are indoor, you does see some difference, but if you do not have both of those smartphones side by side, you do not feel a lot different than using a 13 Pro Max or 13 Pro rather than using a 14 Pro Max. Another thing is that the reception quality on this smartphone is a tad I would say better than the iPhone 13 Pro. So when I had the iPhone 13 Pro Max, I was getting some signal loss in this apartment. It might be some issue with the towers, but it could be the issues with the smartphone itself. So over this in here, I did not feel any issues with the towers or the radio signals on this smartphone, which is a good thing. Now the cameras on this smartphone are an upgrade as well. Apple upgraded from 12 megapixel from every other generation in the past to a 48 megapixel sensor. It is still a quad pairs sensor, which means that you will still get a 12 megapixel image as an output. Now I would say that if it is not broken, do not fix it. The camera samples which I was able to obtain from this smartphone versus my iPhone 13 Pro Max were almost the same. The AI on these smartphones have been gone so far good that you do not need a 48 megapixel camera on this smartphone. It does make a big difference when you are in very low light photography scenes, but apart from that, you are not able to make out a lot of difference between the cameras on this 14 Pro Max versus the one on the previous generation of the iPhone. So an upgrade, but not in a very meaningful manner. Another thing which are able to obtain on this smartphone camera is the cinematic mode. Now I would say that the cinematic mode on this smartphone camera is way better than the Google Pixel 7 which I tested this year. It could be that Google may improve that feature with a software update, but as of yet, I would say this one over here is a camera king when it comes to the cinematic mode. And yeah, I would really recommend, if you are into videography and if you really want to upgrade this here, then this one over here, it is a meaningful choice rather than upgrading the smartphone just for the dynamic island. Another thing which I noticed in terms of battery backup was that the battery backup was actually better, even though the battery is slightly smaller than the iPhone 13 Pro Max. When you turn off the always on display feature, I was able to get about 2 to 3 hours longer than what I used to get with the iPhone 13 Pro Max. In terms of performance, it is almost the same with 9% improvement in terms of the single core performance and about 13 to 14% better in terms of the multi-core. Does it make a lot of difference? I think it does not. The only difference which I saw on this smartphone was that there was a very less thermal throttling, which means that while charging the smartphone and playing games, this smartphone does not heat up as much as the iPhone 13 Pro or 13 Pro Max used to heat up in the past. So this is something that has been changed in this iPhone, which again, if you are looking to upgrade for this very small thing, no, do not do that. Just stick with the iPhone 13 Pro or 13 Pro Max. Another thing is that the speaker quality on the smartphone is almost the same. It is, I think, about 2 to 3% more louder than the iPhone 13 Pro Max. So very subtle improvements over there. The charging speed on this iPhone is also exactly same as the 13 Pro Max, and I think that Apple could have improved on this, or at least gave us a USB Type-C charger, because it is a universal standard these days. Again, I would say that iPhone 14 Pro Max is in every way a very good smartphone, but does this smartphone justify the price to value ratio that you're getting? I would say no. So that is the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Not very different from the iPhone 13 Pro Max. That that is not very different from the iPhone 12 Pro Max, and so on. I would say if it is not broken, do not change it. If you have the iPhone 12 Pro Max or if you have the 13 Pro Max, you are good to go for another year or two with the same smartphone, and just wait for the price drops on the 14 Pro Max. I would say that skip over this smartphone this year and buy the Pixel 7 Pro. You get a new smartphone, a new experience. You get a very intelligent smartphone that is better with AI in comparison to this one. And yeah, Google is doing good in supporting that smartphone. I had a lot of bugs previously, but they fix all those bugs with one of those recent updates, and that smartphone over there is something that I recommend more than buying the iPhone 14 Pro Max this year. So that was me, Anshul. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys on the next one. Peace.